Hi, I'm M Leigh, and I got to spend some time with the horror meister Monty G talking about women in horror. Horror rules!
Y'all ready for this? Hey, horror fans! Once again, it is me, the Horror Miser Monty G. Hey, horror fans! Once again, it is me, the Horror Miser Monty G. Welcome once again to my favorite series. It is Women in Horror, where we celebrate the contribution women have made into horror. And I have a special guest, and when I was at Crypticon, I'll get it right. She was on my panel for sinners. This is Melissa. I believe it's called M Leigh Stories.
Yep, M Leigh. Yep, and my Instagram is M Leigh Stories.
All right, all right. Before we begin, just give a little brief summary about who you are and what do you do for horror.
Well, I am an author. I am also an event coordinator for the Horror Writers Association Seattle chapter. And I am also on a podcast called Beneath the Rain Shadow, which is put on by Fermented Fiction. And that is a creative writing podcast where we give each other prompts and we write spooky Pacific Northwest Gothic stories. And we critique them on air, and eventually they will be in a anthology next year.
Oh, good, 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 good. You ever wrote stories about Sasquatch?
That's really funny. We just broke the Sasquatch barrier on our show where we actually gave one of the other authors the prompt. I gave him Sasquatch to write about, and I think he made a really great story.
I had to bring it up because it's known to be there. That creature's been known to be there in the Pacific Northwest. So I
Yep.
just had to mention that.
Yep.
Yeah. So of course,
Yep.
I met Melissa at Crypticon about earlier this month, and she was on my panel sinners. We had a great time. Of course, I asked her did she want to participate in Women in Horror, and then here we are once again. Yes, just a slight early question. You
Yes.
ever heard about Women in Horror?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yep. I've been on several panels, mostly at Crypticon, about the contribution to women in this amazing genre.
Okay, all right. So my first question to you, because I asked this of all the ladies, because we all know that women are not supposed to like horror because it's gory, it's bloody, it's nasty, it's disgusting. Women wouldn't
Mhm.
like that. They don't cater horror women to horror at all. So what got you into horror? What horror film got you into loving this genre of film?
I grew up in the 80s, and I think honestly say it was Ghostbusters. You
I got
know,
a funny story about I got a funny story to tell you about Ghostbusters.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can honestly say it was Ghostbusters where, I was fairly young, and my mom just said I just kept wanting to watch it over and over and over again. And I think that I was really intrigued by the spooky stuff, the setting, things that are kind of unpredictable and unknown. And I was just always kind of the kid who was like, didn't want to run away. I wanted to know what was under the bed. I wanted to know what was in the closet, all of those scary things.
uh, I'm a child of the '70s, so I was probably 20 at the I did about 20 at the time when Ghostbusters came out. So of course I
Yeah.
saw it when it came out in the theaters, and of
Hmm.
course the favorite line Bill Murray says after Dan Aykroyd tells him Dickless here shut off the whatchamacallum, and the mayor says, "Is it true?" And he goes, "Yes, it's true. This man has no
Has
dick."
no
The
dick.
whole
Yep.
blurted out laughing. It was so funny. It's probably
Yeah.
an ad lib by knowing Bill Murray, but it was so funny.
So funny. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's perfect.
yeah.
But it was
You don't know how old you were when you saw Ghostbusters, though.
I was probably 6 or 7, I would say,
Hmm.
around that. Yeah. Probably
Yeah.
pretty young. Yeah, and I think that's kind of honestly where it started. And then I was a huge fan of Goosebumps of R.L. Stein, who I actually have gotten to meet once, and he was amazingly funny and sweet man. and again, I just absorbed those books when I was younger, always kind of looking
Hmm.
for the next scare.
Yeah, yeah. Not surprising. I was too old when Goosebumps came out at the time.
Mhm.
But any type of those books, Goosebumps, for me at that age was a series of books called The Three Investigators, and another
Mm,
book called Danny Dunn. So those,
okay.
and another guy, another called Encyclopedia Brown. So those books, like for you at that age, for Goosebumps, for me, those were the books that I grew up loving. Mystery thrillers, some
Yeah.
science fiction when it came to Danny Dunn, some of that stuff like that.
Mhm.
But like I said, but I know how people your age, love Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yes, yes, yeah, both of those. I was
Yeah,
always
but
reading.
yeah, I'm not surprised. It always seems to me, since I've been doing this, when doing this thing, it seems like every woman that I've interviewed, it's always when they were young, six
Yeah,
or 7 years old. It's like
mhm,
for some reason we seem to gravitate to horror,
yeah,
even for young girls at the time, because we know it's not real. For
yep.
me, it was watching Universal Monsters: The Mummy. When
Oh,
I was
yeah,
about 6 or 7 years old.
mhm.
you know. But for me, because I had a more of a sense of humor since I was little, my mother thought I either outgrew it or finally realized that this stuff was crazy. But the more I consumed horror, the more I wanted to watch it.
Exactly. I think too, it's like I also have, a really dark sense of humor. And I
Mm,
think that particularly with gory things like gory special effects or especially the practical effects of like the 1980s, which were just so amazing, I would always
mm.
kind of watch them and instead of being grossed out, I would laugh
Yeah,
because it,
yep.
it was so absurd. And I just thought, but it was so much fun and creativity in that absurdity that I really got hooked on them.
Yeah, because it's the same thing with me. It's like I was fascinated, watching the practical effects. It's like I want to know how
Mhm.
they did that. So I would
Yep.
read magazines, especially Fangora, back in the
Yes.
day. I would read
Mhm.
the magazines or learn. That's how I learned about Tom Savini and the makeup effects he did, and
Yep.
Friday the 13th and all the horror films that he did. So that's how I really got fascinated. I was never spooked out or grossed out. It's just for me, it was just fascinating and of course funny.
Yeah, yeah. For
So
sure.
my next question is, what are your thoughts regarding how women have been treated in horror films?
Yeah, I think that there has been, definitely such an interesting evolution with women in horror, especially compared to, I think the movies, um, that we were watching back in the day. I
Hmm.
think women's stories have become a little bit more enriched now, which is also I know so many women writers who do this as well, and I it's interesting. I also wrote an essay for the Horror Writers Association, and it's on my website, and it's called "Where Are All the Boogie Ladies?" And it's kind of I've always really liked exploring the difference between what a boogeyman is and how women are portrayed in the horror genre. So, for example, like a boogeyman is kind of like evil for evil's sake. It's like the personification of evil. And sometimes, like Mike Myers, I know that he has like a backstory, but that's kind of what I think about. Of we don't know why, or maybe we do kind of know why they're evil, but we just know that they're relentless and they're just going to keep coming back. And I've always found that a lot of times evil women are portrayed as either obsessed or vindictive, or they're out for revenge, or they have some kind of like long back history. They're a witch, they work for the devil. And so I really like to explore the idea of why can't women be evil for evil's sake?
Yeah.
And I think a lot more nowadays and a lot more of the stories that I'm watching or reading and even like the movies that I'm watching is we're finding more boogie ladies, which is really exciting. And they don't necessarily have to have some rhyme or reason, kind of like the evil characters that we grew up on. They can just be evil and scary, and that's actually really fun to play with.
Yeah, because I actually find that fascinating. That's one of the things I've always mentioned is because when you look at all the horror icons
Hmm.
outside of the final girls, they're
Yeah.
all men. They're all
Yes.
men. Freddy,
Yeah.
Jason, Michael, Leatherface, Chucky,
Yep.
Pinhead.
Yeah,
And I think to myself, how come we don't have a woman as a horror icon outside
exactly.
of the Final Girls?
Exactly.
That's something that I would like to see happen is that,
Mhm.
we finally get a horror icon that is a female and
Yes.
she's just as popular as the men. And that's
Right.
something I'd love to see happen.
Yep. Yeah, I
Mm,
would I would love to see that happen. I would love to be somebody who contributes to that.
mm. Yeah, because one of the things I find fascinating, and when I see difference how women have been treated in horror films, especially back from the old school classics to what we see now in modern horror. And one of the great examples I give is, the difference between the 1939 King Kong and Peter Jackson's King Kong. We still have the same character,
Mhm.
Anne Dowling, but you see, when
Yeah.
she's portrayed by Fay Ray, she's the typical damsel in distress. But when Naomi
Right.
Watts plays her, she's a very strong woman.
Right.
Even though this film takes place in the Roaring Twenties during the Depression era, she's still a very strong woman. And
Right.
when she confronts Kong, she's not scared. She's not. Well, she's intimidated by him because it's a big ass gorilla.
Yeah.
But then once she realized that Kong likes her, then she stands up to Kong. She's not afraid of him.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
it's a very different contrast when it comes
Mhm.
to females in horror films.
Yes. Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, another great example is when you take a look at how women have been treated, like say the original Black Christmas. Elizabeth
Mhm.
Hussey's character, she's actually doesn't, even though she's pregnant, she doesn't want to get married to her boyfriend. She wants to
Right.
stay in school. She
Right.
doesn't want to have the baby. And then, of course, you look at Margot Kidder's character. She's aggressive. She's a very feminist. She takes no for an answer. So I just like that contrast of how women have been portrayed all the way from the old school to what we're seeing right now. And of course, now with such as writers such as yourself, women are getting more and more notice when it comes to horror films.
Exactly, exactly, and in the old, movies in the the original Black Christmas, it was almost kind of like, she was being punished for being, like, an independent woman, like, all of
Mm.
them, it kinda seemed like they were, and that I think we kind of see that less and less and less, whereas, like, women's individuality, is, and strength is starting to become more celebrated
Oh yeah,
and used in the plot line, which I
yeah,
think makes things a lot more interesting.
yes.
Mhm.
How do you feel about the evolution of the final girl trope in horror films?
Yeah. I think it's still evolving. I really do. I think that we're going to see a lot more exciting things. I would say, Laurie Strode, and the final girls from Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, and yeah, I would say even like Hellraiser and things like that. I feel like they're just merely kind of surviving, the
Hmm.
situation.
Hmm.
And I kind of appreciate the newer Halloweens where we see kind of Lori being a badass, and she's got the trap for Michael, and she's kind of ready. That they did the same thing, I think, in the Scream films with Sydney as well. But again, it's kind of like this poor girl is caught in this horrible circumstance, and she seems to have all of the right elements to where she's finally going to, survive the bad guy, and usually just kind of barely gets away. Um, and I feel like now the final girls have a little bit more of a plan, a little bit more of action in the plot that's happening. Um, and I think that it's not unusual when like the smart girl like speaks up, which I think was so interesting in an Alien, right? Alien and
Hmm.
Aliens, where Ripley was essentially like the final girl, and if they had just listened to her in the first place, everything would have been fine.
Yeah.
And same thing, and that's why I loved her so much in Aliens, because she was this woman who was taking charge and giving orders, and not just giving orders to regular people, to like the military, because she knew what was happening, she knew what was best, she always had a plan. So I kind of feel like back then that was very unusual. I honestly can't think of another final girl that was like Ripley back in the day.
Hmm.
And so I'm kind of hoping that more and more of that is going to kind of come out where it is celebrated. I mean, I almost consider Emerald from Nope a final girl as well, even though both her and her brother survived. But I feel like she also had a plan. Like she was kind of thinking like 5 steps ahead of everybody, and I so appreciated that.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, Kiki Palmer did a fine job in that particular film, and I like the fact that she actually knew what she wanted to do, and she
Yes.
decided to execute the plan, and of course, the plan worked. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, the plan worked. Yeah, I think when it comes to the final girl, I like the evolution of it. She's no longer the nice girl. She's not the virginal girl. She doesn't accidentally
Yeah.
survive or trips and falls to where now the
Yeah.
final girl is she's damaged. She might
Yeah.
take drugs. She's not the virgin anymore, but she's
Right.
smart. She learns from her mistakes, and I think that's why I like what we see now in the evolution of the final girl.
Yeah, yeah, so she doesn't have to be kind of like this embodiment of pureness or innocence anymore, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
she survives. Like, she can actually be celebrated for her smarts
Mm-hmm.
and strength. Yeah.
All right, this is a good one. Now, now I want you to compare the Thing, which
Mhm.
was an all male cast, to
Yep.
Descent, which was an all female cast.
Yeah.
And tell me, why did the Descent do so well?
I I think The Descent did well on, like, not on a couple of levels. One, again, like, these were not damsels in distress. These were, women who were, exploring caves, and they were adventurers, and, like, they put themselves in situations I would never put myself in. You'll never see me in a cave ever. So they went into it, and they were incredibly capable characters. And so you kind of knew that even though bad things are going to happen, they're not going to all huddle together and be like, what are we going to do? Like, you kind of realized from the start that they were in fact problem solvers. And they were really important characters. And I think the main character, and I can't think of her name right now, but the
Sarah.
woman, yeah, Sarah, who had this horrible traumatic thing happen to her. So we're already so invested in her story. And
Hmm.
I think what's kind of amazing too is as that film goes on and they get stuck and things are starting to kind of crackle and come apart, and then all of a sudden you see like the weird creatures, but then you kind of see like their friend group kind of crackling and coming apart as well. And so I
Hmm.
think that just layered upon layered upon layered. And then again, in the end, it was just her being smart and capable and winning. And I think that that's what did such a great job. And the Thing was so interesting too, because even though it was an all male cast, I felt like all of those actors were so vulnerable. Every character was vulnerable in that film. And you could kind of see the crackling happening there as it would in these wonderful isolation situations. But I think that the fact that these women were in a situation already, that they were going to have to get themselves out of by using just planning and togetherness, I think that that was really intriguing.
Yeah, I like the fact that they would actually use their intelligence to figure out what
Yes.
those creatures were. You
Yes.
know.
Yeah. And how they operated and, like how they could navigate through there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's one of the things I noticed. One of the things when I was trying to come up with some new questions for women in horror, and I thought to myself, yeah, let me put that question down and see how that goes. Yeah, yeah, because when you take a look at it, it's kind of the same thing. The Thing has an all male cast, The Descent has an all female cast, which is
Mhm.
something we really don't see, especially in horror. We
Mhm.
don't see an all female cast.
Yeah.
There has been some other films where it's a female centric film, like The Craft is
Sure.
a female, although there's male characters in the film. But
Yeah.
as far as an all female cast, which just females,
Mhm.
that's why I really like The Descent. It was one
Yeah.
of my favorite horror films, and I don't know if especially of course what's going on in today's modern world, if that film can be successful now as it was back then.
Yeah, I think it was just something so new back then, I
Hmm.
don't yeah, I don't know if it would necessarily, kind of have that same, impression now,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, yeah, it was definitely I remember thinking that and I didn't honestly realize it until the end of the film where I'm like, "That there wasn't, like, a guy in there." Like, maybe a little Definitely.
Yeah,
And
that's why I
I
said.
remember thinking, I was like, "Wow, that was really cool."
Uh, 'Cause that's what when I first saw the film and I first saw the cast, I said, "Oh, it's an all female cast. Oh, I'm gonna like this." And the first thing that came to mind was the thing.
Yeah,
I said, "Wow, about time."
yeah,
Another new
yeah,
question:
yeah, about time.
Do you think there's a difference between a heroine in a horror film to the final girl?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's always sometimes I'm always, like, a little bit hesitant to call Sigourney Weaver, like, the final girl, but I'm like, because she was definitely kind of the hero throughout that whole thing. She was
Hmm.
the person that we look to of, like, "She is gonna get us out of this situation. She's gonna save the little girl. She's gonna save, Hicks. She's gonna do, all of the things we want her to do," even though she was kind of trapped in this situation, and she does tend to be or she is usually the final survivor. And I kind of feel like final girls just kind of stumble upon their situation and they're not necessarily interested in, being the hero. They're just interested in surviving.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of where I would see the difference.
I see. Would you say Zazie Bates and They Will Kill You as more of a final girl or a heroine?
And They Will Kill You. I don't know have I don't think I've seen that one yet.
You haven't seen that one yet? Uh,
Uh-uh.
I
Is
thought you
that
might
one
have.
is that one newer?
Yeah, it came out earlier this year. It's kind of like similar to Ready or Not, and Ready or
Oh,
Not Two have this same similar premise.
oh, I love Red.
Premise.
Okay, I'll have
Yeah.
to watch that one. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. She's definitely a badass in the film. Although unfortunately, I would say for the first 2 minutes she fights in her underwear. So
Well, you gotta put people in the theater somehow.
yeah, yeah, that's what they did. I said, oh, hell, man, what a way to get people to go in the theater when she fights in her underwear for in the first 10 minutes.
Right? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Okay, speaking of nudity, do you feel that women were disrespected or objectified during the early slasher films in the '80s with all that gratuitous nudity? It's like for some reason, or especially after Friday the 13th came out, from '80 to around '83, we just
Yeah,
had this. You couldn't have a slasher film without a woman exposing her breasts or her
right.
chest or behind or sometimes full frontal nudity. Do
Yeah.
you think they were being objectified and disrespected?
I definitely feel like they were, I mean, they were exploitation films, like I've heard, Joe Bob Briggs talk about this a lot, on his show where, again, it was kind of like giving the people what they want, and it was
Mm,
nudity and it was gore, and it almost kind of became like this own genre in itself. Like when I kind of think of like the earlier slasher films, I feel like it is horror, but it's kind of different to like the horror that we know today. I do feel like some of it was gratuitous, but
hmm.
I also feel like I don't know how it's weird. I have such, like, fond memories of the genre, you know what I mean? Like, when I
Oh
watch
yeah.
it, like, I never feel, like, offended or anything like that. I don't know if we could get away with it again today, um,
Hmm.
but it's like, I feel like it was almost kind of like a necessary element of that genre to where, so I don't know. I don't know if I would necessarily say, it was, disrespectful, but I definitely think that it was thrown in there specifically for viewership.
Yeah, because I
Yeah,
I think especially at the time, most movie studios thought that people who were going to see horror films were either adolescent boys or men
sure.
between the
Mhm.
ages of 18 to 35.
Sure.
So the best way to get them into see the theater is get a bunch of hot girls together or hot girls together and have
Yep.
them be naked for about 10 to 15 minutes, even though it had nothing to do with the movie
No,
whatsoever.
no. Like, naked at slumber parties, like, that's just what us girls do. It's like, never happened. Um, Yeah, it's interesting, and I think also too that stereotype has followed the horror genre throughout the decades, and especially
Hmm.
kind of now for people who say they hate horror, and I think that that's kind of the image that they have. They just have some mindless slasher killer running around, and there's naked girls who, are damsels in distress, don't know how to, survive the situation. So yeah, I do appreciate it for what it was, because I fell in love with horror back in that day.
Mhm.
But I do feel like it is that stereotype that has followed it that has made a lot of modern horror writers and creators having to kind of break that of like, no, the horror genre is so much more than that.
I know, because one of the problems I have when it comes to movie studios is when you take a look at Jennifer's body.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, we have a almost 10 to 15-minute makeout scene between Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the whole film is marketed because of Megan Fox attractiveness. But
Sure.
the film wasn't about that makeout scene. It was about between the friendship between Jennifer and Needy, and
Yep.
to come to find out they really weren't great friends. But unfortunately, the movie got marketed that way. A
Yep.
lot of people didn't like it, but
Yep.
as we see right now, it actually is a decent horror film.
Oh, it's amazing. It's one of my
Mm.
favorites, and it that's such a has such a brilliant script. And it's
Mhm.
just, it's, hilarious and amazing. But yeah, yeah, again, and it was kind of going off of that sexiness, I think, of that trope. But there was so many more elements to it.
Uh, I feel sorry for Megan Fox though, because even though it's like this is not her fault, I think she did a good job in
Mhm.
that particular role. And then I forgot the other film that she was in that she did a good job. She gets handcuffed to her dead husband. I can't remember. I can't remember the name of that film too.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Yeah,
Was it Gerald's
yeah.
Game?
No, it wasn't Juror Game.
Yeah.
It's similar plot though.
Yeah. Okay.
Similar plot. Yeah, similar plot. But no, she is. I think it's Fall Apart. I forget the name of it, but she actually did a good job in that role too. Yes.
Awesome. I'll have to check that one out too. You give me so many good suggestions to watch.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the rape revenge films? And do you think that a male writer director can faithfully make them, or do you think a female is more capable of making such of those films?
Um, I'm personally not a fan of that particular, trope in horror. I
Mm-hmm.
I I typically don't like watching films that feel realistic.
Hmm.
I typically tend to stay away from kind of like the home invasion movies or the rape culture movies or, anything where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this could happen." Um or kind of gore for gore's sake. I do feel like female directors and female writers can bring something, I would say, a little more different than a male writer could, a definite different perspective. So I feel like the films that are out there are very effective, the ones that I have seen. I don't think, I don't have anything really bad to say about them other than the fact that I just don't personally like them. Uh, but I feel that, for sure, I think a female director and writer can definitely bring more of a realness to those kind of films
I
and
see. So you
authenticity.
okay? So you did. So I take it you probably saw Revenge.
I did, yes,
No.
yeah, I saw Revenge, and I mean, I loved the cinematography in that film. I thought it was just like a beautifully made film for,
Yeah, it
kind
was.
of,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
for
thought. Yeah, yeah. I thought she did a good job in that
mhm.
film because she also went on when did the Substance, which was fantastic.
Yes. Yes, yes, definitely. Yeah, so, like I said, I think that it can be done. I mean, the films can definitely be done well. I'm just not I'm not in the front row to watch them.
So I take you did not see either the original "I Spit on Your Grave" or the remake.
I did see both. Yeah, I
Oh.
did see both. I probably saw I Spit on Your Grave way too young.
Hmm.
And, I did catch the remake, one night when it was on. Um, and I found the remake to be a lot more, satisfying, I
Probably,
guess.
it's probably because because you want to talk about not saying that the original she got her revenge, but yeah, the remake she goes nonstop.
She goes
I mean,
nuts, yeah.
she brutalizes those dudes, but they deserve
Of
it.
course, yeah, they totally deserve it, so you're like, "Wow," and I think, like, her ways of killing them was just very, very creative.
Oh
So,
yeah,
yeah, so I gave it to her for that.
oh yeah, especially the shotgun.
Yes, yes, especially the shotgun, oh my gosh. Yeah.
All right, but listen, do you consider yourself a gorehound?
No, not so much. I don't really consider myself kind of a gores for gore's sake. I love, when it's done well, like I would
Mhm.
say, like what you mentioned, Ready or Not, it's one of my favorite films. And I just love it, people just popping and exploding. I think that that's just, again, it's like absurd and it's fantastic. And it's like, sign me up for that. And especially the more practical the effects are,
Mhm.
the more I absolutely adore it. But I would say I'm more creepy. I like the haunted house. I like the witch in the woods. I like a very uneasy, situation more than the gore. I like the feeling of being scared more than the shock of the horror, I guess.
I see. Yeah. So you probably was a fan of The Witch. Of
Yes,
The
very
Witch.
much fan of the book. Yes, very, very much. Yeah. I really love everything Robert Eggers does.
Mm.
I think his films are very hypnotic.
Oh, that they are.
Yeah.
They can't get hypnotic when you come to Nosferatu.
That's right. Yeah, but no,
Okay.
but
Do you?
I love a good splatter, especially around, spooky season and Halloween time. I think last year my husband and I watched every, Friday the 13th. There was a lot of them,
Mhm.
all the way into like, the Jason verse people. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely do enjoy them, but I would definitely prefer, being spooked out.
It's booked out. Yeah. Hey, look, we all have our niches when it comes to horror.
Yep.
And do you think women directors of horror films are finally getting the respect that they deserve?
I think so. I think so, and I hope that there is a lot more. I hope that there, are a lot more opportunities for female writers, particularly in this genre, because it has typically been a rather male dominated genre. And I think so. I think women are finally kind of, being noticed, and kind of allowed to explore, you know, all of the different themes that come with, womanhood. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, the substance.
The substance, yeah, for example, again, just such an amazing commentary on, beauty and society and Hollywood especially. And I can understand why Hollywood really liked that film because it was, very much kind of like this really dark, twisted inside look of what the culture is there. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, and I also love especially too how, we're seeing older women, in a lot more movies. When I say like older, like I don't consider to me more to be old, but she's
mhm.
definitely older, and like Barbara Crampton's still working, and
Oh, yeah.
and I
Mhm.
yeah, so whenever I see actresses that are not necessarily, spring chickens, I really like that as well.
Oh, yeah. Lynn Shade's still working.
Oh, I love Lynn Shay. I love her so, so much. She's the original.
uh, okay, Melissa. So, what led you to
Mhm.
create and become a horror novel author?
I again, I really like to explore, scary women, and I think that's kind of where that came from. I kind of consider myself a women's fiction horror writer, so
Mhm.
it's not necessarily, kind of sticking truly to like a horror trope. I like to explore stories from the female perspective. And in the novel that that's complete is not out, but I have an elderly female protagonist who is a crochet artist and she does bad things. And it's kind of like, the exploration of that. She's not necessarily a boogie lady. She has a lot of reasons for the bad things that she does. But I honestly feel like I stole my mom's copy of Dolores Claiborne when I was young. And I read that and I thought that Stephen King did such a great job, kind of with that quiet female rage in that
Mhm.
story throughout, that I could even recognize as the young, teenager, preteen, maybe even, that I was. And I love kind of exploring, those stories and those possibilities from the female lens.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Do you like writing protagonists or what you call them, baddie girls? What do you call them?
Boogie ladies.
Boogie ladies. Yeah.
Yeah.
You like?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, boogie ladies, I like kind of like the exploration of, maybe she doesn't need a reason. Maybe she's just evil. Maybe, this is just her, and I kind of, and that's kind of why I challenge everybody to kind of think of like a true boogie lady, and there's really not that many like out
Mhm,
there. A lot of times even, people say like, well, Annie Wilkes is a boogie lady. But she's so obsessed with Paul Sheldon, and like the obsession is such like the part of that female trope of, why
mhm.
she's doing what she's doing because she's obsessed with a man. And boogie lady that's not a witch, right? She's not, you know, hanging out with the devil. So I really like kind of exploring those options where the women don't have those kind of like little scapegoats throughout, where they can just be evil as a man.
Well, yeah, because unfortunately, thanks to shows like Criminal Minds and True Crime,
Right,
we have to have a reason as the reason why people do the stuff that they do. But when you
right.
just have someone such as Michael Myers,
Yeah.
it's just like he's just pure evil.
Yeah.
That's reason why I didn't like the Thorn trilogy.
Mhm.
Trying to give Michael Myers a reason. I said, no, no, John Carpenter didn't create this guy just because
Right.
he was part of this weird cult. I said
Right.
the mystic about Michael and what makes him scary is that he doesn't have a reason. He's
Exactly.
just plain evil.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know, and I think just like a lot of people don't think that women can't be serial killers. That's the reason why
Mhm.
a lot of women got away with a lot of stuff back in the day because no one
Sure.
could think that a woman could not be a killer. But
Yeah.
you will actually will come up and you actually will see a woman who can just be just an evil person and have no reason whatsoever.
No
You
reason
know.
whatsoever, yeah. Yeah, but I
Mm,
I feel like especially, in popular culture, it's like we kinda have to give these women reasons, and I say even in they're doing it with Disney movies, Cruella de
mm,
Vil got her own backstory, Maleficent got her own backstory, and again, it's kind of like, giving explanation to this, you know,
mm.
thing that you just expected was just evil, and so I'm like, "Why do they need explanations?"
Gorilla the Village, she just wanted to have fur coats made of Dalmatians.
She's just like the puppies. Yeah,
Yeah, Melissa said she was just evil, plain and simple. She didn't,
plain and
and
simple.
not because she got rejected when she was a kid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And I feel that too. I don't feel like, people sit around and ask like, well, why is Freddie the way he is? Why is Jason the way he is? It's like if they do have an explanation, it's very, very minimal. But I think
Mhm.
especially with female villains, they kind of look for some sort of explanation. And I don't know if that thinks that they like it thickens the plot, but I don't know. So, but it bothers me.
Yeah, but then again, it's all about the money.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Okay,
That is true.
who is your favorite final girl and why?
I would say, again, if we were gonna call her a female or a final girl, it would be Ellen Ripley for
Mm,
sure. Um, you know, just because she was kind of unapologetic and, screaming her point and making a plan and saving the day, and also, being so motherly, but then also so, strong and capable and independent. But then I would also say, I like Laurie. I like Laurie Strode. I always liked her. I I, and again, it's probably because that's one of the first ones I ever saw, first slashers I ever saw, and, um I don't know if she did necessarily anything heroic in that film other than just
mm,
kind of survive. Um, but Jamie Lee Curtis did such an amazing job with that role, where I think like every young girl babysitter could see themselves as her.
mhm.
And she
Yeah,
played it so realistically.
yeah. I think that's how it got caught on mainly
Mhm.
because of Jamie Lee Curtis' performance. She was just a typical babysitter caught in a
Yep.
very particular situation, trying to make sure she protected the kids, and she wound up surviving.
Yeah, yeah, and
That's basically what she did.
yeah, and there wasn't anything particularly wrong or weird or, like, quirky about her. She was just completely average and
Hmm.
had average friends and just had, like, average teenage problems, and I think that that's what made her so, so relatable.
Okay. All right. My last question to you, Melissa, is that if you could write or create a horror film, what type of horror film would it be, and what subgenre of horror would it be?
You know, I like I said, I like all of the spooky, haunted
Mhm.
house and kind of folk horror-y and witches and things like that, but the more that, I've been on panels, and the more that we've been talking about, final girls, like I want to write something with a final boy. Like I want the slasher to be a female. I want it to be a woman. I want it to be a group of guys, and I want there to be a final boy at the end.
Hey, that would definitely be a different
Yeah.
take when we get a bunch of guys coming over. And next thing you know, they're being attacked by a girl.
Right, right, and, and have it just be totally supernatural, like a Jason
Mhm.
or, a true boogie lady of just, we don't know why this land is cursed, but she's there, and get your weapon of choice, whatever she would have, and yeah, she just kind of runs amok, and then there will be a final boy at the end. I think it's time for that.
Yeah, I think it's time to do, but I do like that premise. It'll be something totally different. You
Mhm.
have a group of guys getting together. All of a sudden, you got this weird woman that's attacking them. Don't
Yep.
know whatever reason, and they have to fight in order to survive. It's
Yeah,
nothing different. It's a similar premise. It's just a group of guys, not a group of girls or a group of couples or a
exactly.
group of friends.
Yeah, and and she can't die. You can knock her down a couple of times, but she keeps coming back. She's relentless. It's just I love that. Give them a
Yeah.
run for their money.
Okay. All right, Melissa, I want to thank you once again for coming on Women in Horror. You've been such a great guest. It was nice
Thank
meeting you at Crypticon, and hopefully, if I'm
you.
there next year, we'll might be in another panel again.
I would love
Uh,
that, and thank you so much for this invitation. This has been such a fun conversation.
yeah, yes, yes. Obviously, if you want to read and see anything that Melissa is writing, I'll have her link to her website. As what's the website again? Just in case it's as a
It's M Leigh Stories.
yeah. Yeah, I have our social media links, and that link is on the description box as well. I want to thank Melissa again for joining us here on Women in Horror. And of course, once again, my name is Lamont Smith, better known as the Horror Miser Money G. And always remember, horror rules. All right, please stay safe out there.